I think Harrison Ford breaking his foot on the set of Star Wars Episode 7 kind of worried people about this because, we don't want the Expendables 4 to happen in a nursing home. So The Expendables 3 is directed by Patrick Hughes, written by Creighton Rothenberger, Katrin Benedict, and Sylvester Stallone, and of course stars the returning cast: Stallone, Jason Statham, Jet Li, Dolph Lundgren, Randy Couture, Terry Crews, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and now we've got a huge addition of people. We've got Antonio Banderas, Wesley Snipes, Kelsey Grammer, Kellen Lutz, Ronda Rousey, Glenn Powell, Victor Ortiz, Mel Gibson, and Harrison Ford. Now, in The Expendables 3, the Expendables on a mission to Somalia discover that the big warlord mastermind behind this thing they're trying to stop is the co-founder of the Expendables, Conrad Stonebanks, played by Mel Gibson. And after Mel Gibson pretty much takes them all out and overpowers them, Barney Ross, played by Sylvester Stallone, has sort of like an attack of the conscience and says, okay, you guys, I can't risk you guys dying anymore. You've lived long enough. You deserve like retirement. So he goes off to fight Conrad Stonebanks by himself, but not before recruiting a bunch of new guys. Now, for a series as shallow, dare I say, as The Expendables, it's actually kind of interesting to kind of trace like with what each movie represents. Kind of like the first one was them trying to prove themselves in like the modern age. Second one was them embracing what they really were, and the third one is for me clearly them kind of passing on the torch to like the younger action stars maybe of tomorrow. Now, I have nothing against PG-13 movies, especially if you have like an R-rated franchise and suddenly you take a dip down and release a PG-13 sequel. Sometimes I think that works, like Live Free or Die Hard, which I actually really enjoyed. It's that worked because there were other things to focus on aside from like the R-rated action supposedly. But here in this movie, there's really nothing else to focus on except the action. This is just an action movie, and the fact that they made it PG-13, I was bothered by it. I will go back to that later on. I just wanted to let it out now. But in the end, I really think that The Expendables 3 misses the point of its predecessor when it's trying to, embrace itself. And this one doesn't really embrace itself so much as it does parody itself. This is a parody of itself. Now, one of the things that infuriated me the most about this movie was the fact that there was so much obvious CGI everywhere. Everything in this movie is CGI. The backgrounds, the buildings, the tanks, the helicopters, the plane. The plane they use is CGI for like a lot of the shots here. And the explosions, there's a fake parachute for crying out loud. And obviously making everything CGI and stuff, it just sucks away all the intensity and all the excitement you could have from this because you know everything's fake. You know no one's gonna get hurt. Now, this movie is not violent enough, thanks to the PG-13 rating. It's not violent enough to be, desensitizing. Like, it's not like numbing violence like in the first movie, but it's just dull this time around. Like, because there's no blood splatters, there's no nothing. You just see people kind of fall down. It's really, really boring. I'm sorry. And because of all the CGI backgrounds and whatnot, it really does feel like you're on set. You never get the feeling that they've shot in location or anything. And The Expendables 3 also repeats some mistakes that the Expendables 1 made, in my opinion, concerning like production design and stuff. Like there's no more personality to things anymore. Like what happened to the cool cars they had at the beginning of The Expendables 2? Like I want to see those back. The surprising visual beauty also of The Expendables 2 is now gone. This is a lot more similar to The Expendables 1, I think. It just looks very lazily shot. And this is where I get to the PG-13 stuff. Because they had to censor out so many of the blood and so, the more violent actions and killings, the editing here is just terrible. It's just, it cuts everywhere. Just as soon as someone like shoots, it just cuts to the person just, falling down. I forgot to mention in my last review for The Expendables 2 that what I loved so much about that was that you could finally see the different like fighting styles of the different Expendables. Jason Statham finally has a big scene with knives and stuff, and Stallone with his akimbo pistols and whatnot. And in this movie, the editing just butchers every action scene to the point you don't really know what's happening. No one has a big action moment anymore because there's nothing to focus on. And there's no flow to the fighting either. All the action scenes just feel like just tossed together. And not only is there no flow to the fights, but the whole movie itself, I think, really rejects its strengths. Like having the actors and these action stars, and rejects those to show things we don't really care about. Like a big chunk of this movie is really just Stallone looking for replacements for the Expendables, and plot wise, that's not something we want to see at all. It's really boring. We're not attached to these guys anymore. At least, if these older Expendables aren't really good characters, at least keep them around because we're attached to them at this point. Again, there's a straightforward revenge plot here, but without the emotional kick, because this movie I think is it's so confused, because I personally was confused about why Barney Ross did the things he did in this movie. For me, they don't really make sense. It's weird for me that he would go and grab a bunch of kids for a suicide mission. I mean, doesn't he remember what happened in the last movie? Spoilers, I guess. And in terms of characters, like I mentioned, the old guys still don't really have any characters to do them, but the new guys have even less character, and it's painful to stick around with them so long. The dialogue occasionally reaches for depth, and sometimes it does achieve that. They do touch on different themes that were not present in the first Expendables movies, but there's still some terrible writing here also, and very run of the mill stuff. Now, in terms of the actors, some of the Expendables themselves have, their moments, but again, you can tell that no one's really trying to craft a character, and the new kids also, they can't really act, honestly, except, well, maybe like Kellen Lutz, surprisingly, the same guy who was in The Legend of Hercules at the start of the year, is actually the best among the kids. But still, they aren't really tough enough to make us like them. They're not tough enough for us to remember them. Now, in terms of the direction from Patrick Hughes, I hate to say it, but this movie, in terms of direction, really reminds me of A Good Day to Die Hard. It's just so bland. Patrick Hughes does not use the star power he has. It's not even intense at all, and the bad directing makes the CGI direction even worse, because it's harder to direct CGI stuff and to make it look good. And like the helicopter fights in this movie, oh my god, they're just eh. Now, if there's one saving grace about this movie, and the one reason why I'm pretty sure this won't end up on my worst list of the year, is Mel Gibson. Mel Gibson in this movie is so good. I don't know what he's doing in this movie. An actual Academy Award winning, I think, actor. He's the best actor out of this entire franchise, and he just has so much fun with his villainous character, and he's the only one who really feels like he's taking pains to make this character unique. And he's the only person in this movie that when you look at him, you don't think it's Mel Gibson. And, like everyone else is just their actors, and here he's really playing a character. And there's a scene where he's in a car with Sylvester Stallone, and he's giving like this villainous speech, and it was so gripping. I was just, oh my god, like this is suddenly quality. And then when that scene ended, I was like, okay, there it goes. So in the end, thanks to Mel Gibson, I'm not gonna say this movie is terrible. I will say it's still pretty bad though. Unfortunately, also this movie bombed at the box office, and I think this is the end for this franchise. I don't think we're gonna get an Expendables 4 or a Young Expendables or the Expendables, because Sigourney Weaver already said no. My theory about this movie is that with the budget they had to give most of this budget to the actors, because there's so many of them, and they just didn't have enough for CGI and whatnot. But I think it's a real shame, because when I look at the action stars now, if you even have that many, we don't have that many, and I don't think we can have, like, this generation, we can't have our own Expendables down the line. Like back then, the 80s and 90s, that was really the golden age, I think, of action, and we won't get something like this anymore. All right, so that is my review of the Expendables 3. Have you guys seen it? What do you think about it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Whatever you thought, whether you agree with me or not, please leave me a comment. Let's have a conversation.